Welcome to the podcast. I'm Chris Graham. Got Rod Mullins here with me. A couple of days later than normal. I was on vacation for the last few days down in the beach area of Virginia, and we're going to catch up on some NASCAR news. And we're actually going to start with some off-the-track news that has our attention involving Rod's favorite NASCAR driver, who usually we can't say his name, but we can't avoid it today. Denny Hamlin making some news, Rod.
Yeah, Denny Hamlin's making some news. Rumor has it right now, and this was hot off the press from some of the NASCAR, I guess, reporting groups that are out there. Rumor has it right now that Smithfield is dropping their sponsorship after 10 years being with Stewart-Haas, I think is what they're going to be doing, or all together with, number 10 or Eric Almirola, any way you want to look at it. The situation has led to the possibility, will Stewart-Haas possibly switch car manufacturers? There's that rumor that's going around. Some people are saying we're just getting set for the big announcement that's going to be coming soon, that Dodge could be re-entering the fray when it comes to NASCAR, because I don't see how you can go and continue, well, I guess, manufacturer loyalty or things like that, or stuff that you need for your race team, like he's doing right now in the NHRA. He's getting special, things. He's driving a Dodge there in the drag racing part of his career. And so what better yet to be able to come over to NASCAR and bring them back, and then they switch all over to Dodge. And then the most interesting story that's coming out of this is that Denny Hamlin still has not signed anything with Joe Gibbs Racing. He says it's on the horizon. It may be so far off on the horizon right now that a lot of people are speculating that he may leave Joe Gibbs Racing and he may bring sponsorship or take sponsorship with him when he goes over to his own team, which is 2311 Motorsports. Now, here's where the problem lies. He can't go and drive another car, say, for example, a Toyota, while having sponsorship with Ford. It's either going to have to be him because he's part owner in it, or nothing at all. It'll have to stay the same. So I would look on some movement here in the next couple of weeks, and we'll see this. And they're already floating this whole thing about the Joe Gibbs curse. I don't know what that all boils down to, but it's kind of that same hint, I guess, with everybody thinking, hey, Kyle Busch left. Now we're about to lose Denny Hamlin. And big news coming out this afternoon is that here we are getting ready to go to Daytona for this race. And Trevor Bayne from out of Knoxville, Tennessee, had a ride with Roush Fenway Racing for a short time, won the Daytona 500 driving for the Wood Brothers. He is now going to race in a couple of races this season for Joe Gibbs Racing. Now I'm beginning to wonder, have they kind of just been prepping him to get him back into a car that we will see a career revival of Trevor Bayne? I mean, he's been off. He's been in several things, doing some things on NASCAR, especially on Fox, doing some things with NASCAR commentary and so forth in the studio. But mostly, since he had kind of got out of racing, he hadn't fooled with anything except for running a coffee shop. And that was a coffee shop he and his wife set up in the Knoxville area. And I understand it's doing really well. They've expanded, but he still has had the itch to get back into racing. So that's big news coming up this weekend with them going to Daytona and racing on the high banks there at Daytona. That Trevor Bayne going back, it seems like, in his first race back, and he could have the possibility of showing pretty well on Sunday or Saturday night, Sunday when they race.
That's a lot to digest there. There's so much that is going
on,
or maybe going on behind the scenes.
Right.
As far as maybe starting with Dodge, Dodge getting back in, what what would that mean? You get a new manufacturer coming in, but of course, in this environment where the cars are rather standardized, what impact would that have on the circuit?
Well, they're going to have to go with a car that really it's just going to be a nameplate that's going to be branded on the car, because all the cars are pretty much the same. No way around it. I mean, you're an engine builder, you build everything according to NASCAR specifications. they're going to have to come up with something which I feel like would be in a way very close to what they have at the Dodge Challenger. I don't know if that will be the race car that they will choose. But that's what they've raced before. They used to race the Intrepid. They raced something else, but then the Dodge Challenger kind of came back. And a lot of fans know that Richard Petty made a lot of impact driving in NASCAR with that Dodge Challenger at one point. So if they get back into racing, I think they're looking for the most comfortable opportunity. They're going to have some kind of thing of where they know they're going to have a car design that's going to be similar to the Camaros and the Mustangs, because if you look at them, they essentially look the same. They look like they're just one shape. So they're going to have to come up with that. They're also going to have to be able to establish an engine builder, so to speak, for Dodge cars, for Dodge engines for these cars and so forth. And that's their name that's going on them. I think there's a lot of shuffling that's going on to see if this is really going to happen or not. I think that, Tony Stewart, he may stay with Ford. I know Ford's tried to roll out the red carpet for him so many times to hold on to him, but don't rule out the possibility they may go back to Chevrolet. They might go to Chevrolet because they're losing a Chevrolet team with Legacy Motor Club. So, Chevrolet's looking for drivers right now. Toyota's looking for drivers, but I don't see a Toyota going drag racing per se, after Tony Stewart and his wife have had so much success running Dodge this past season on the circuit in the NHRA. So I kind of feel like that's going to maybe stay there. I think that could happen. Now, as for, I don't think Joe Gibbs Racing is going to leave Toyota. I don't think Toyota is going to leave the stable there whatsoever. But we're starting to see a change in power, per se, if you want to call it that, because here they are. They're moving over to Legacy Motor Club after they dropped Chevrolet. Could it be that the little bit of the luster off of the Joe Gibbs trophies and all these things that they've won before maybe, starting to tarnish a little bit, and they may be looking for a new outlet? I don't know. It's a lot of things are still up in the air. Probably we'll know more by the time we get into Bristol. There'll be some big announcements there, because that's the last, that's one of the cutoffs for the playoffs, and they bring a lot of people in there, and they have some big announcements that'll come through. So that's what we're looking for. Probably an announcement sometime, maybe even after they get into the playoffs, when some of these teams are not going to be pressured so bad to try to make the championship, and that's when they'll make the announcements.
So Hamlin, if he were to go back, I'm going to say go back, he's never raced for 23XI, but if he were to go to 23XI, who would that push out of 23XI, or would they just try to add one more team?
He would try to add one more team, and I think the question is that number 10, the charter, the number at least for the charter, as they call it in NASCAR, will be up from Tony Stewart Racing. So they may lose that number, but then again, he may turn around and take the number 10. They'll buy the charter, get it over to their team, and they'll go with that number. I kind of don't foresee Joe Gibbs giving up that number 11. They've raced a whole year without Kyle Busch's number with the 18. Now I'm wondering, is that what Trevor Bayne's going to be driving? I'm going to have to check it out. Is he going to be driving the 18 car when he gets to Daytona this coming weekend? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, that charter number is a big thing. And these charters that are going up for sale, they're expensive. Dale Earnhardt Jr. has said it. I don't know if I'm going to get into it right now at this time. I'm going to have a lot of things in the right place in order for me to be able to, for example, race on the Cup circuit. But right now, I'm kind of satisfied where I'm at. And I kind of just don't like this controversy with all the stuff about the charters.
Okay, we got that covered now. For now, at least, we've got a good handle on that. Now, let's go back to where we were last weekend. Of course, we're heading into Daytona for the last regular season race coming up this weekend. William Byron, dominant at Watkins Glen. He's now a 5-time winner this season. He's got to be a favorite to win the whole thing, at least at this stage. And so he gets the win. That's part of the news. Also, a big part of the news, who didn't get the wins, including a guy named Chase Elliott, who's still way on the outside looking in as far as a potential playoff berth is concerned. And there's only the one more race this weekend to sew up those playoff berths. So a lot of fallout coming from Watkins Glen and how things turned out there.
Yeah, and not to mention right here, Bubba Wallace has to finish above 13th place, has to finish the race and everything at Daytona, and he qualifies for his first out-and-out playoff spot. Now, there's going to be some pressure on him. There's going to be some pressure on that car to kind of stay clean during this racing when they have at Daytona coming up this weekend. Will we see Bubba Wallace in the playoffs? Yeah, I think there's a possibility we will see him in the playoffs, but that still leaves that one playoff spot here that anybody could try to get in on. There's actually just one playoff spot left, and that's the one that Bubba Wallace is trying to vie for. But again, you mentioned Chase Elliott. Alex Bowman is out of this. He's been involved with it. Daniel Suarez. All they need is a win. If they get a win, they're in. Bubba is out. So, I mean, this is that last spot. And I hate to be in this situation. If I was Chase Elliott, I hate to be in this situation with my back thrown up against the wall saying that I have to win a race to get into the playoffs. It would be a great accomplishment for him, but I think it's, odds are right now, there's some things that's probably going to shuffle and change over in the off season. Could be starting with crew chiefs. I don't know what they'll do, but if Chase Elliott doesn't make this, I think some big changes are on the horizon at Hendrick Motorsports. And they're even talking about Alex Bowman, possibility of him, I think, on his contract. He may be in the last year of a contract, and he signed here recently, but I think it was a 1-year extension. It could be that he could be gone after that. We don't know what's going to end up happening as the season progresses on, but those guys, and including Daniel Suarez, of all things, Daniel Suarez is wondering where he's going to be at because his contract is going to be up. And then you have Gisbergen coming back in again, the talk of him, and Trackhouse wants to hold on to him. They don't want somebody else to get him, and rightly so. I mean, he dominated the race at Chicago when he came in and won that race, and he's had a little bit of a learning curve to the oval. Yeah, I wouldn't want to let him go and stuff. He shows the most potential of anybody. The big thing is, will he be able to get out of his supercars contract, which he says that he will be able to. He wants to come full-time racing here to NASCAR in 2024. So we'll just have to wait and see on that too.
Far as Chase Elliott's concerned, the idea that he may not make the playoffs, the only thing I can think equivalent in any other sport, because I was going through my head there, like, what would it be? The Yankees not making the playoffs? Nah, baseball's a tough sport to be good in every year. You start going down a list, and the only thing I can think is maybe Alabama having a bad season in college football.
Yeah, I mean, that's about it. You're right. I mean, Alabama having a terrible season, but Alabama fans are, if they have 2 losses on the season, they think the whole season's trashed.
Yeah,
They don't care. I mean, that's the way they are and stuff. And they think that, oh, the season, write it off and everything. We're not going to win a national championship. Well, we'll be back next year and we'll hit them like hell is what we'll do. I mean, that's kind of what you're talking about here. And Chase Elliott with this, he was in position. I mean, he was in position at one point. He could have jumped into this whole fray and got into this playoff thing, and he wouldn't have had to worry about that second place finish that he had. I know he's kicking himself over and over at Brickyard for coming in second place on that, but it's not exactly just him driving. It's all the components of the team, and somebody has dropped the ball somewhere along the line that, you see Kyle Larson, William Byron leading now with 5 wins on the season, most of anybody in the circuit. It kind of makes you scratch your head and wonder where all this is going with this multi-car teams and stuff. Are there haves and have-nots, or do the haves that used to have all this stuff become the have-nots after a while when somebody gets hot on the have-not list and moves up to the haves? I mean, it kind of makes you scratch your head and wonder. I've wondered that about Hendrick Motorsports, and they say it's an equal thing, but sometimes it feels like they've got more momentum on 2 other teams than they do the 2 other teams that we expect to be kind of in the playoffs. And We've expected them there. They've had 4 cars in the playoffs before, but this is going to be different, only having 2 cars if Chase Elliott doesn't make it this weekend.
So as far as William Byron's concerned, dominant performance. He didn't win the first stage, but he dominated the last two. Didn't even have anybody close to him in the third stage. And this is his first win on a road course. So I mean, you wouldn't have predicted this going into the race. Talk about his afternoon.
Oh, his afternoon. I mean, I don't think he could have done any wrong. If he did make any mistakes or anything, he's not going to talk about them because, right now that team's just flowing. That team is just moving along. But now you've got other teams that some of these cars have ran well at road courses before. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Austin Dillon and somebody having a little bit of a brush up in the pits after the race on Sunday at Watkins Glen. Because of contact and somebody spinning Austin Dillon out, and he kind of had some choice words for his guy. But yeah, here we are. I mean, this whole thing with William Byron has just shown that he's kind of matured. He's come along as a driver, especially with Hendrick. Hendrick has stayed with him. He's one of that younger generation of drivers that has made the transition over to this sport and has done so quite well. He's had some good breaks, and he's taken advantage of those breaks. And I'll say this, I think he's been great when he's raced in iRacing. I think that's where he's gotten a lot of his, kind of his teeth. He's got his teeth, he's kind of sharpened them up, and that's how he's become a better driver. And, I think the thing that happened last year when Joey Logano bumped him at Darlington, I think that kind of turned him around a little bit more, thinking, I've got to be a little bit more aggressive. I've got to punch, and I've got to try really hard to win these races. And like you said, no one would have expected him to run and win a road course like he did at Watkins Glen, but he did so. So surprise, surprise, folks, this is how it goes. You just don't know who's going to win on a given course wherever you race week to week. I mean, we may have somebody that's more of a road course person. AJ Allmendinger, he may come in and win an oval race. I don't know what will happen.
So you mentioned, Rod, that right now Bubba Wallace sitting in 16th, very precariously, though. He's not sewn anything up. There were two teams who sewed up playoff berths with Byron winning, and thus, no new winner able to jump anybody else. Kevin Harvick, Brad Keselowski, both punching their tickets for the playoffs.
Right. And, it's another good commentary for Brad Keselowski because Roush Fenway, Keselowski Racing has really made a statement this year, more so with Chris Buescher and the wins that he's gotten. But it shows that team has kind of lifted itself up out of the doldrums. And as bad as they'd been performing the last year, who would have thought this team would be back into it? And Keselowski likes his chances here into the playoffs. If they can go stay clean, stay out of trouble, they could be there. If they can make it all the way through to the cuts, they could be in the championship. And then the other one's Kevin Harvick. I think it's a great way for Kevin Harvick to end the regular season. He's locked. He doesn't have to worry about anything. This is final season as he gets ready to retire. I think it's perfect. It's fitting for Kevin Harvick. We'll see more come out of Kevin Harvick, I think, now by the time we get to Darlington in the playoffs. He rides rough when he's down at Bristol too. He will dominate. He will push you out of the way because he loves short track racing. He loves short track racing so much. In fact, he and Dale Earnhardt Jr. bought into a touring series here with, I think, another driver or two, the car series. And he's enjoying every minute of that. And then he's enjoyed some time, I think, racing also on this Tony Stewart Superstar Racing experience. He's enjoyed that time of what he's done. But I think this is big for him. He's locked himself in, really doesn't have anything to worry about. Not one of those things of I have to race to get in it. He has been consistent all season, just hasn't gotten the win. But I think we may see more out of him coming up in September.
So, Rob, we talked about Chase Elliott and how disappointing it would be for a driver with his cachet to not make the playoffs. And of course, he's the 2020 champion. He's had several good seasons the last few years. Bubba Wallace, we talked about him a little bit. He's not made a playoff yet. He might be. I mean, Daniel Suarez, AJ Allmendinger, Alex Bowman are guys. Ty Gibbs they're also in that in the race right now, certainly as guys who could overtake Wallace for that 16th and final spot. But Wallace might be the biggest name guy who has not been in a playoff. I mean, it might not be arguable that he's the biggest name guy who has not made a playoff yet. How disappointing would it be for him if he gets past and is left out on the outside looking in again?
I think it's going to be a big disappointment for him because they have stayed consistently, like Kevin Harvick and like Brad Keselowski. They have stayed consistent through the season, even when you thought that they were out, they weren't going to be able to get back into a race. They would fight, get back into the race, and that's what they would end up doing. I just think it would be a big disappointment for Bubba Wallace and also for 2311 Motorsports because they put a lot behind this guy. They put a lot behind Bubba Wallace. And folks, one way or another, given the controversies and things that have kind of swirled around him, whether or not he flipped the bird on Fox News or Fox TV, Fox Sports coverage of the race that time, his attitude and how he has been sometimes in post-race interviews or even pre-race interviews. He's kind of given a persona that he is, for short, lack of a better term, he's a jerk. That's what a lot of people think of him. I think he's desperately trying to prove that he belongs in that 16-team playoff and that they've got a shot with it. He's been quiet here as of late. He's mouthed, he's said some things, but I think it's been something that's been okay. It's been consistent, backing it up. It's not been a crybaby sort of attitude about things. He's stated it the way it is. So if he makes it, more power to him. He'll be, more than anything else, he'll be the first black driver in NASCAR that's made the playoffs out of this whole thing, and he'll be contending for that championship. But that would be a great feather in his cap to just get that playoff nod and get that in, and then also move on through the playoffs, because I think this team's got some possibilities. It's just a matter of how bad does this team want it. That's what it's going to boil down to.
It should be fun for us watching on TV, people who are there in person this weekend, just because, okay, the challenge if you're trying to work your way in, win your way in to the playoff field here is, all right, I want to be aggressive, but I've also got to be around at the end. So I mean, I can't imagine the pressure that those racers, those drivers are going to be under, when they're out there at Daytona, because those are two very different approaches. I mean, you want to be aggressive, you want to be around at the end. So I don't know, how do you balance all that out? In a sort of winner takes all kind of scenario, it feels like.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think that's what makes the NASCAR playoffs that much more intriguing. It's one of those things of in baseball, you hate to say goodbye to somebody, but we'll be back next year. That is, if all the trades and everything goes well in spring training and so forth. But how do you do this? How do you maintain that kind of composure on a week in and week out basis for 36, 39 weeks that you're racing? The NFL can't even do that. The NFL can't do that. Major League Baseball, they've got over 100 games is what they, specialize in and so forth. But, they really don't matter until they start getting down to the stretch here in, July, August into September. That's when it really matters for them. For NASCAR, it happens from the start of the season. Used to, it wasn't that way. It was just, hey, just maintain consistency, and if we get into the playoffs, we'll get into the playoffs and everything will look good. But that's not the way it works in NASCAR now. With this tight point system the way it is, you have to be consistent on a week in and week out basis. And if you do have something go wrong with you, a DNF or something, you've got a chance to rebound back. But if you do that for 2 or 3 races, that's going to really mess you up on down the line of whether or not you're going to get into the playoffs or not.
And I love the way the system rewards winners. And so that adds another element this weekend too, because you mentioned earlier, Bubba Wallace, if he finishes 13th or better, assuming no one behind him wins. So,
right.
He wants to run well, he wants to win, but if he doesn't win, he wants to finish, in the top 13, certainly top 10, top 5. But then he's going to be on the lookout for one of those other guys sneaking around and taking the checkered flag. So, yeah, man, that's you know, and it's great, you know, from a TV scheduling standpoint. It's prime time Saturday night. Football season starts next weekend for the most part. There's a couple college games this weekend, but nothing of import. You know, so the Saturday night prime time, the eyes and ears and everything else will be paying attention to what's going on. The pressure's there. So I guess we can look for a you know, foot to the floor, balls to the wall kind of racing this weekend from a bunch of teams.
Yeah, that's what I expect. I expect it's going to be that way, and it's going to be definitely balls to the wall on this one, because I mean, there's just no other way around it. It's you come prepared, you come ready to race, and if you just sit there and you're going to be Mr. Consistency and I'll stay in the middle of the pack and wait for the big one to happen. No, I think the big one could happen very early. We could have another big one about midway, and we could have an even bigger one by the end if some of these cars can stay together in it. You know, if Bubba Wallace is in it till the end of it, and we get to this situation, bam, oh, you got to watch out. He will move cars out of the way to get to that front till he can get that, make sure he's going to get that playoff spot.
When you talk about too, I mean, if there's a late race restart, last 10 laps, last 5 laps, oh my God, they're going to be lined up and they're going to be knocked. It's going to be demolition derby out there.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. And some of these teams, there'll be somebody that's out there and says, hey, I've got nothing else to lose. Let's go and knock him out of the race and stuff just because he bumped me or rubbed me the wrong way during the regular season. I'll have a chance to get back at him. You've got people that's really right now that could be spoilers in this whole thing. There are a big group of spoilers, and hey, take it into consideration. There's things that's personal against some of these drivers, and some of them are going to just show what they've got and say, if I have a chance to knock him out, I'm going to knock him out of the race.
Daytona International Speedway, Saturday night, 7 o'clock on NBC. And of course, follow us here on Augusta Free Press. We'll keep you up to date throughout the race. And then Rod and I will get back together next week and break it all down. Rod, as always, thank you for your time.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thank you.